episode 286 of the Tennis Files podcast, you'll learn how to become mentally stronger and excel under pressure. Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm really appreciative of you tuning in. I'm actually in Orlando for a little bit. I'm going to be playing at the USA National Tennis Center and some clinics and enjoying the warmer weather down here, so really glad about that. But today I put together a mental game masterclass for you featuring some really great advice from Nick Saviano on how to reach your full potential, how to deal with anxiety and self-doubt, and how to rise above adversity. Some great lessons from Peter Freeman on why obsession is a key trait of successful tennis players and how to combat laziness and get out of your comfort zone. And some great lessons from Vesaponka on how to develop a holistic pathway and how to have a healthy perspective about sport and life and how that helps you handle pressure better. And also how to foster internal pressure into positive motivation. And so Nick's full interview is episode 280 of the podcast. Peter Freeman's full interview is episode 271, and Vesaponka's is episode 226, and we'll link to all those in the show notes. But without further ado, I hope that you enjoy the great golden nuggets from these episodes about how to become mentally stronger, and here they are.
I want to get into how players can reach their full potential because, as a podcaster that's his main goal is to try to help players improve their game. First off, what do you think the biggest impediment is to that prevents players from reaching their full tennis potential?
Anxiety, self-doubt, a lack of skill in the fundamental life skills of success. And that sounds like really philosophical, but it's not. Fundamental principles of life success, which are at the core of my methodology. I call it the Saviano method. And, that's a centerpiece of what I do, what I try to do in Maximum Tennis Online. And, there are certain things that are irrefutable, like the ability to deal with and rise above adversity. Having a work ethic, a perseverance, a willingness to have courage, which, as I said earlier, alluding to Nick Bollettieri, one of his great traits was that he wasn't afraid to be vulnerable. When I say vulnerable, if you want to be great at anything, you have to be willing to push yourself to your limits and to expand on your current limits. It's very important. And in doing so, if you're not making mistakes at some point, you're not really pushing yourself hard enough. And so being willing to be vulnerable so that you could be courageous in striving and reaching for your ultimate goals, whether it's on the tennis court or off the tennis court. You want to use tennis as a vehicle by which you either coach life skills or that you cultivate life skills in those that are important to you or your students. So those are really key principles. When you see somebody struggling with their game, given that they have adequate coaching or whatever it might be or opportunity, you really want to look towards the skills of, let's say, for example, let's use an example of hitting a ball and staying focused in the moment. In the moment, when you're focused hitting the ball and you're really watching the ball closely, a la Federer, if you look at Nadal, does the same thing, head still slightly after the hit. Same with Alcaraz. All of the great ones will do that on virtually all of their strokes. It's far more profoundly significant than the mechanics of it. What it means is that the person is absorbed in the hit, and by doing so, they need to let go of being concerned about the outcome. They have to be absorbed in the execution. Now, that's one of the most fundamentally important life skills to be successful, is whether you're you're interviewing for a job, whether you're executing in your work or you're have a big test ahead of you, you must let go of the things you cannot control and stay absorbed in that which you can be controlled. And when you're doing that, you're going to flow more, you're going to perform better. And yes, you will make mistakes, but the profound, subtle result is these are good mistakes. When you are trying to do things as well as you can, and you kind of fall on your face or you make a mistake or you're struggling, that's a good thing. That's a process of learning and growing and evolving. And that's where brilliant proteges live. They live in that zone of not where they don't make mistakes. That's absurd. They make mistakes all the time, but they make good mistakes and they learn from it. They don't cringe when they make a mistake. Say, okay, then they go to the next one and the next one. If you watch somebody who's brilliant in math, you see them, they get the problem wrong and they kind of scratch their head and they look at it, and they look at it almost with a fervor and excitement. So let me see if I can meet that challenge. How do I correct that? And that kind of passion towards growing, improving, evolving are really some of the keys to helping people reach their full potential. Conversely, when you see people that are not willing to do that, when you see people who are afraid of making mistakes, what is mom and dad going to think? What are the coaches going to think? Oh my gosh, I'm a terrible person because I had a bad loss. You are looking at someone who needs help to overcome that negative approach, because that will stifle development. It will stifle creative genius. You cannot be a creative genius. You cannot be creative when you're fearful of the mistake. An artist can't be creative when he's saying, oh, what if I make a mistake? Well, it's the same thing in athletics. It's the same thing in tennis. You've got to let it go. Now, obviously, there are a multitude of things that you can do from a pure developmental standpoint to enhance your skills. But if you're not cultivating those life skills of success, then you're going to put real limitations on yourself.
Yeah, very well put, Nick. And yeah, you made me think of my very first college tennis match, which I had a big lead effectively and blew it. And my coach told me to focus on the process, not the results. And,
Very true.
yeah, and that takes you very far in all aspects of life. But I guess how do people who, because I guess, even the words themselves, like when you think of like failure and mistakes, like it has a negative connotation. So I guess naturally the player person, when they lose, like they'll feel bad about the situation. How do those people who are used to it produce, when they have a negative result, their results get even worse and their mindset, like how do you make the transformation to what you described in the first instance?
Well, it's a process like anything else. And very often, when you work with a player and you get them at 12, 13, 14, or older, or you get an adult, a world class professional, it took a lot of years and a lot of time and effort for them to get where they are. Obviously, everyone's got positive redeeming characteristics, but we find with almost everyone we work with, there are some negatives, there are some less than optimal mindsets. So you have to take the time to explain it consciously, where the person intellectually grasps what you're trying to do, and then you create systems and processes for them to work through. But one of the most important things, in my opinion, in the field of psychology is that when you see somebody out on a court and you see that they're negative, let's say they missing a serve, say, gosh, I always miss that shot or whatever. Yes, you you can tell them, oh, be positive. It really doesn't help you when you get down on yourself. But for me, you have to really understand and explain why this profoundly limits them. You must elevate the understanding level of that individual. And one of the most important ways is to take it out of the context of tennis and use an example in life where it would be obvious to them. They're often not as sensitive about, oh, I just double faulted, in the match 5 times and it cost me the match. Well, obviously, they're very sensitive about their serve and all of this stuff. But, talking to them about a self fulfilling prophecy where, from a negative perspective, meaning, I always double fault in big matches. Somebody's always saying that, and they go out, it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. And so they're prophesizing on what's going to happen, which in this case is a negative. And when you explain the damaging effects, not only in a tennis match, but in life, and that's really important that you see this adversely affects you in life. And you know what else? It will adversely affect your loved ones around you that are important to you in a negative way. Now you've made it into something that's more than, oh, let's just be positive when I make a mistake on the backhand. Because one of the important things about coaching and helping people learn is they are going to do and work on what is meaningful and important to them. And it's fine for a coach to go out and say, or a mentor, teacher, whatever, oh, this is really important. And they're expressing how important it is to them. The goal is to take that player and make it really important to them to want to change it because they see the significance. That's when you get buy in, and somebody is going to put the time and effort to legitimately make the changes and adjustments in the way they behave for the long term.
Got it, Nick. So I was trying to maybe create another example. Like maybe you as a coach see that the player really needs to work on their serve, and
Right.
they maybe brush it off, and then it's kind of your job to explain to them like, well, if you work on your serve, then you're going to be able to enjoy tennis more and get the results that you want to get. Like I know there's probably a better example out there, but I mean, is that it's just you're holistically trying to explain like why improving a particular aspect of their game will give them what they truly want.
Well, yes. Yeah, for example, I would try to put in a positive way and explain to them how it can profoundly help them on their journey. And that um, I'd also use an example if you have an overall goal that you want to achieve, let's say collegiate tennis, or if you're in the seniors, like I have a younger brother who's in the 60s, and he's either number one or two in the United States. He helped win the world championship for the United States. So he's a very good player. It would be applicable to him. Recently we were talking about his serve and wanting to make an improvement on it, and those kind of things. So that was important to him. You want to let them understand that if they have a long-term goal, like I said, say great to be in a Division 1 school, you explain to them how by tackling this head on is going to help them achieve their goals. So you paint a positive vision of what is possible, and you avoid painting a negative picture like, oh, your serve is really going to cost you the ability to get into college. No, you flip it and you say, you know what? You have the potential to really improve your serve a lot. And when you do, you're going to find you'll hold serve easier. The game's going to be more enjoyable. You're going to be able to have a lot more wins. And that's going to help you in your goal to become a D1 college player. So you try to turn it around, create it a real positive. And it's not what's the word? You don't want to be Pollyanna. It's not, oh, everything's is great. No, it's going to be hard work. Yeah, it's going to be frustrating. Yeah, you got to push yourself. But in the end, it will be worth it. That kind of situation.
So Nick, in terms of systems and processes being a very important part of improving the player once you've identified any issues, um, let's take the example of let's say the individual you're seeing is exhibiting a lot of negative self talk. What's a simple system that you have either employed with a student that you've seen has this issue, or that you would suggest? Because I do see that a lot with adult players having the negative self talk.
Well, as I was saying earlier, um, first explaining why it has such a profoundly negative impact and how it is adversely affecting them to accomplish what they want to accomplish. And also, as I said earlier, if they're adults and they have children or something along those lines, letting letting them know that this profoundly affects their children as well. Because if they're doing it here, they're doing it with their kids, whether they know it consciously, subconsciously, certainly inadvertently. But we don't want to pass something like that on. So uh, I'm all about constant growth. And when somebody realizes, often they don't, that they tend to be negative with their self-talk, and you approach the subject not in an, an accusation like you're so negative, but pointing out to them in hopefully a tactful way that this is something that's transpiring, then you've got hopefully an athlete who happens to be adult or a child that is more motivated to make some adjustments. Then from that point on, you don't want to try to conflate issues. For example, just because someone gets mad doesn't mean that's negative self-talk. So somebody could slap themselves on the side and say, come on, move your feet, something along those lines. Well, n- if somebody is kind of yelling and is animated and they're negative, you're not going to turn them into Mr. Stoic. And that may not be their on-court personality. And you want to work with that on-court personality. But if you can get them to use that energy in a more positive way, come on, get up after your serve, let's go. These kind of things, or run for every ball. That's it. Move your feet. Then you give them something tangible to adjust to. And then also there are many common things that psychologists will tell you, whatever. um, and you miss a point, try to take a deep breath, walk around, try to flush the negative thoughts away, and then replace it with a more positive, upbeat kind of response. Use when you're releasing energy, you can look up at the sky or be broad in your visual. And then when you start gathering your breathing and getting your focus together, you look down at the strings and go towards whatever procedure you want to do. If it was a serve, you know, telling yourself tactically where you're going to serve. You can also go to the line and tell yourself, okay, I'm going to toss and turn, really explode up. So you can actually talk yourself into a process of executing.
Yeah, excellent stuff, Nick. And there's something else that you mentioned a bit earlier, which is being able to push yourself to the limit and expand your limits. And that made me think about the interview that Novak Djokovic had after his match with Daniil Medvedev, where I believe a journalist asked him about how he was able to, push himself. And even though he looked like he was in really bad shape, and he was, I think, shaking at one point, if that was the right match, that how he was able to still, win the match. And then Novak said that he doesn't believe there are really any limits. And so that was a very interesting response. And then also reminded me of a former Navy SEAL named David Goggins. He wrote a book called Can't Hurt Me, and he said something to the effect of, when you think you can't go anymore, you've actually only reached 40% of your maximum. So, I mean, this is clearly very important to be able to push yourself to the limit and expand. So, how do we condition ourselves to do this? Because it's obviously very painful and tough to do for players and people. But how do we do that?
Well, first of all, my philosophy is that no human being ever reaches their full potential and ever pushes themselves to their limit. I think that um, as we get close to pushing ourselves to our full potential or to our limits, yes, it can be very painful, very challenging. But I believe there's a wonderful thing that happens with human beings is their abilities expand, their ability to do more increases. And so the limits, it's I don't know that anyone's really reached their full limit. Which individual in the history of the world would you say reached their absolute full potential? And you'd reflect, you can go down to some of the greatest minds, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Sir Isaac Newton, the great uh, philosophers. And even in the modern times, I've never seen anybody who's really been able to get every ounce of what they're capable of out of themselves. But that's the beauty of it, is that you keep pushing and evolving and growing. And when somebody thinks in a myopic perspective, like, oh, that's just about physically pushing yourself, no, then even if somebody doesn't have the physical capacity, they have their mental capacity, and they can do things mentally at another level. And I think it's a fascinating field. And as far as players or learning that, that's trained. You got to train them. You got to train them to push themselves. Obviously, you're not going to turn a 14-year-old into a Navy SEAL. um, you you can't do that, but you help them grow and push beyond what they think they're capable of within reason. um, Demand things that they feel maybe is a little too high for them, and one, encourage them when they fall on their face, say that's okay, pick yourself up, keep going. But that kind of mentality is going against the common grain in our society now, which I am adamantly opposed to. This thing about people, oh, you've got to protect them emotionally and so on. Obviously, we're not talking about abusive situations. No one's That's a negative all the time, or um, somebody that is and intimidating people or bullying them. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, look the challenges in the eye, prepare yourself, and work to try to overcome it. And if it's not one day, the next day, challenge yourself. It's part of cultivating growth in your life. Without growth, there is no life. And so you need to be thinking in terms of growing, evolving, improving relentlessly. And so, to answer your question, I would say it's a process that is trained, it's a process that should be encouraged and cultivated. And it's very important to teach players what I call my 99% rule is, when you get close to 100%, nobody gets to 100, because as you get that close, you improve. And then also part of that is, you must tell young people in advance that in order to really be the best you can be, you've got to be willing to give it everything you got, or as close as you can, on a given day, fall on your face and get up, and then have the courage to do that, then get up. And when you come out the next day, the miracle of being a human being, the brain cleans itself up at night. There's a lot of things that go on. I really should know the technical terminology. It kind of flushes away a lot of excess psychological noise and garbage, and it reorganizes. And very often, You come out the next day and those things that you were struggling with, you say, wow, I'm actually better. I actually got it a lot more. A lot of people in music will say, after a good night's sleep, I woke up in the middle of the night the next morning and I had the music that I was looking for. I heard that Einstein used to say, he asked the question of a psychologist, why do I get all my best ideas in the morning? Well, he might work himself an incredible amount and then didn't quite get it. And the brain reconfigures things, and the next morning you're better. So, educating people on the importance, making sure that you bring them along where they have little small victories when they challenge themselves, and encouraging them is really essential in that particular area.
Yeah, let's get into obsession. Before this call, or before the recording rather, we were talking about, that there seems to be kind of even a negative connotation about being obsessed and some misconceptions about it. So you want to start off by talking about that?
Yeah, I think sometimes when we love something so much, we can start to feel self-conscious about it. Sometimes people knowingly or unknowingly can make us feel guilty about it, like, oh, get a life. You ever heard that? Like, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to do that. Oh, go get a life. That's all you think about. That's all you do, but when you really look at people who have just a lifelong passion for something, they're obsessed with it, and they get so much rewards out of it, so much enjoyment. They learn a lot about themselves. They're always challenging themselves, trying to get themselves to the next level. And I think it's a great thing. And really, what comes to mind when I think about obsession, maybe the most obsessed person I can think of, besides Rafa Nadal, that's another one that's popped in my head, is Tom Brady. The guy is now 45 years old. I actually look at the way he plays, and I'm thinking the last couple of years, the guy's actually getting better, not getting older and worse. He's somehow, to me, looks like he moves faster than he did when he was younger. His arm looks just as strong, and he's able to, perform under extreme pressure. In the game one of this year, he ran a 2-minute drill to lead his team to victory. So, and he's a guy that will watch film all the time. Like, how many football games has he been involved in? And he's still watching film on football. And it's that type of mindset that no matter what you do and what type of level you're at, is going to always keep your mind challenged and keep you engaged. And I think that's what's most important, even more than the actual results of winning and losing.
Yeah, 100%, Peter. I mean, I think about the times where I accomplished, the biggest goals that I've had, whether that's, any of the stuff that I do for tennis files, or if it's like, like sectionals, or, a tournament. And like, I've been obsessed at those moments. I've just been fully engaged in like just trying to study as much as I can and preparing as much as I can. And, that's really kind of the key to success that I've found. Obviously there's certain people that, maybe you have to dial a bit back at some points, but I think for the most part, and definitely for me, I think the obsession route has been key to my development in both my career and tennis as well. So, what are some steps to becoming obsessed? Like, what sorts of things do we want to do? Because that seems like, again, it's like a key trait to those who are successful.
Well, I think you just leave no stone unturned, and you just embrace the idea of being obsessed, and you don't feel guilty about it, and you don't ever wonder or worry if you're doing too much. I mean, obviously physically you can do too much if you feel like, well, I keep working out, I'm getting hurt all the time. I'm not talking about that, but I even want to use you as an example in this. Is our TennisCon coaches, the people who are presenters and coaches at TennisCon, they are, for the most part, obsessed with what they do. I'm always looking on Instagram and seeing you interviewing somebody else, where you have the tennis summit. Well, all throughout the year, you're interviewing all these really great coaches. You took it a challenge a couple of years ago to get in better shape. And I made a joke to you today. I sent a text. I said, I don't like your video you sent in this year because you look younger and fitter and have more hair than last year. So
Right.
like, and so it's that really is so important. I think is the idea of always keeping that hunger, never feeling satisfied, but not in a frustrated way. Like always going, what is next? I can't wait to see what's next. What can I do? What else can I learn? And the idea of, to me, I've seen it all, I've heard it all in tennis. I mean, what else are you going to tell me that I already know? That to me is a limited mindset. And a lot of people who think that way, from what I've noticed, they get to a certain level and then they plateau, and then they're willing to hear an idea here and there, get kind of engaged here and there, but then something usually is a roadblock to where they either just stop learning or stop going to the practice court, or they're trying a new idea to implement in their game. They try it for a little bit. Oh, that's not going to work for me. And those are the people that stay stuck.
Yeah, and I have some follow-ups that I jotted down here. So I guess first of all, how do you kind of balance out like obsession with maybe maybe it getting to be like too much or like unhealthy or stressful? Like what's the key to that sort of balance?
Well, another guy that I want to talk about is Milan, who is with 10 Fit Men.
Mhm.
And he has now worked out for close to 1,000 days. You can look at his Instagram. I think he's up to like day 982 in a row or something like that.
He's
So
a
not
beast.
only is he working out,
Yeah.
but the time it takes to then make sure making a video, editing the video, posting it, that's another set of obsession, dedication, persistence, consistency. And he talked about that, he used to play on the tour a bit. He has been a practice partner to Djokovic. I've seen him hitting with one of the Bryan brothers. He's a very high level player. And right now he's not on the tour, he's coaching, but he wants to be fit and ready if he ever gets that call. He doesn't want to go, well, I'll get ready if I get the call. No, he wants to be ready from day one. But he says the biggest reason that he does it is not for the likes on Instagram. It's not even to get the call. It's that inner drive. It's that idea that I'm proud of myself, that I've done it again, that I showed up again. And he said that, he doesn't know when the streak is going to end. He wants the streak to just keep going. Because I asked him, when is the streak going to end? He says, I just want to keep going and going. And that to me really crystallizes what being obsessed and being dedicated and just enjoying the process. And here's another thing about enjoying the process. Enjoying the process doesn't mean that you're always in love or happy about what you're doing, because he said that most days, which is incredible if you think about a guy who's gone 982 days in a row, he goes, most days I don't want to do the workout. That shocked me. He's like, most days I don't feel like doing it. And if you've ever seen the guy, he's certainly fit enough to where he could skip a day, a week, a month and still look ripped. So, but he said, but once I start and I get in it, I just get so happy that I'm doing it, almost to the point where it like brings tears of joy, he said. And when he's done, the high that he has, and he says and that was his message to everybody. He's like, when you do something, even if it's something you don't want to do, but when you do it, after you're done, you never regret that you actually did it.
Yeah, I love that. And you made me think about David Goggins, who you might have heard of. He has this book called Can't Hurt Me. And I see him, he's on Instagram, and he has like the most hilarious, stories and videos, but, not safe for work. It could be some of those, but yeah, he does things that he hates. Like he actually hates running. And that's like his primary exercise that he does every day for like so many miles. And he's ran like ultra marathons, things like that. And he also will do other things that he hates too, like diving in water, like, cause he's always hated swimming, but he did it, as part of being like the Navy Buds program. And yeah, I think it's just kind of training your mind as well, because a lot of times the mind controls us, and we just do things habitually, like automatically, and we seek comfort. But he does those sorts of things that he hates so that he can retain control of himself. And so I just draw some parallels with Milan here, where he says that he hates working out, but he's doing it just to you know show himself that he has that mental toughness to do things that he necessarily doesn't want to do, or that he's fighting the creature comfort sort of thing. A lot of times when we fight through it, like Milan has that great feeling of accomplishment, so that's really like a big thing. I'm curious though, kind of to dive a little bit deeper into Milan's whole thing, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but like, how could he work out, close to 1,000 days in a row without any sort of like, injuries or anything like that? Is he given any insight into like, is he kind of having rest days where he does like minimal workouts? Because that's obviously something that, people talk about a lot in terms of balance as well.
Well, I think he's a pretty high level athlete. Like, if you guys don't know who I'm talking about, go to Instagram and look him up. 10 Fit Men
Yeah.
Milan. You'll see him. He's got like a beard and he's ripped. And
Yeah.
from what I can understand is I don't think he takes too many easy days. He doesn't take too many short days.
Dang.
But again, I think what allows him to do this, of course, he is younger. I mean, you're still pretty young, but not everybody can work out as much as Milan. I'm not saying, I'm using him as an example as mental toughness, but he's at an age where he can do it, and he leaves no stone unturned. Like, it's not like every single workout, all he does is just like jump up and down, do 100 kangaroo jumps and kill his body. He also does, he
Yeah.
does everything. He's very, very flexible. Yeah, he's very explosive. He takes care of his entire body, and he eats right. So when you get in the habit of doing all the right things besides just doing a hard workout, you can work out every day. His body's gotten used to it. His body is kind of past the soreness. Not to say that he never gets up and feels sore or there's nagging things. I'm sure he has that, but also high level athletes can tell the difference between uh, pain that's a soreness and pain that is an illness, an injury. I meant to say that, like, well, if I keep doing this, then I'm not gonna be able to play anymore. So I think he knows that, and thank goodness he hasn't run into an actual injury that I know
Yeah.
of.
Yeah. Good stuff. So more an obsession. I mean, and this, this happens with me all the time. Like a lot of people, like, how do you deal with the laziness factor? Because like, you can have an obsession, or maybe you develop one for a little bit, but then there's all these like roadblocks, and like obviously, like we talked about earlier, like your mind wants you to do things that are comfortable. So let's say you're obsessed with like improving your serve, but then maybe you try a new technique and then it doesn't pan out, and then like your favorite TV shows like on, and you just want to watch that instead of train. Like how do you kind of battle with that conflict?
One other great presenter that's been part of TennisCon, been a part of the Tennis Summit, and we've both been so lucky to have him multiple times, is Rick Macy. And so when I hear you say that, I think it's about drinking your own Kool-Aid. Like Rick Macy has come up with all these lines. Persistence is undefeated, a run for every ball. And
Right.
and he's always positive. He tells me that he loves getting up at 4 a.m. and getting to the court and teaching from 6:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day, a guy who's in his 60s. He tells me he loves to do it every day. And he has definitely trained his mind to where it's not like he's blowing smoke up his what. He actually bought in to his own propaganda. So, I don't know if you can call it propaganda or not, but what I'm saying is he's come up with all these mantras that he believes in, that he also lives. And I think that is important, because if you have this where you're like, you have these beliefs, and then you just really keep reminding yourself and reminding everybody about these beliefs, you can then deal with adversity. It's not like he says that, there's no adversity in what he does and that it's not hard what he does, but he's grateful for being able to do it every day, and he doesn't take it for granted. And I think that that's another thing. It's really easy as a tennis player, because it is a tough sport, to start to have a pity party going, oh, well, I'm trying really hard, but, I'm still stuck at the same level. I've been trying to change my serve, but it's still the same. I've been trying to beat this player, but I still lose to him or her. And it's easy to kind of do that and go, well, I'm just not going to put as much time in, or I'm going to give up, or I'm going to go play pickleball, right?
Ah.
So it's easy to do all that, but if you then start to remind yourself, well, why did I start this game in the beginning? Why? I just love tennis. I love the way it looks. I love the way the ball sounds. Every day, the place where I live, I just absolutely love the weather that I get to play in, or I love the club that I belong to, or my coach is so cool, or I love learning from these online instructors. Like, keep reminding yourself of all the grateful things that you have associated and tied with tennis. And you got to remind yourself how good you really have it. Yesterday, I watched a video on the 5 worst jobs in the world, are most dangerous. And there are so many of them where people are literally working around acid and carrying hundreds of pounds of sulfur on their back every day, which is not only hard to do, but life-threatening, and climbing up in trees and getting acai berries for everybody to have their nice smoothie. Like, and they're getting paid like $17 a day. And so if you're on a little bit of a losing streak, or you can't fix your serve in a month, you really don't have. Yeah, it's perspective.
Yeah, that's a great technique as well, Peter. When I'm on the court and I'm having a rough time, sometimes I think about how lucky I am to just play the beautiful sport of tennis and just be out here and, have all my limbs, knock on wood, and things like that. And so, yeah, the perspective is a big part of it, for sure. So, and again, I have a sense of what this answer might be, but I'm curious, on average, how much time do you spend on the mental game with your players, comparing that to, the physical and the on-court and all that stuff? If there's any sort of, average number, or does that just like vary depending on the player?
Of course, the easy answer is that it depends, but let me try to be a little bit more specific. I feel, and our team feels strongly that, all these parts of training that hopefully will create this comprehensive training regime is that they are interacting well together. So I'm not a big fan of, let's say that you go to the dark room and you are listening to the whale music and I'm going to be good. No, I do not believe in that one. I believe that this mental work is done on the court a lot. And it's basically, we are talking about mental discipline and focusing skills that needs to be learned, and concentration skills. So we try to do as much as we can on the court, creating situations that will stimulate players to be in a tough position. We believe that we try to take the kids out of their comfort zone and then help them way back into it. And of course, there has to be an individual approach, and that's when the mental coaching and the mental expert will jump in, and they can spend some one-on-one time. And when there are some deeper issues, which we all have. So to answer your question, it should be everyday topic that is discussed, and it's an everyday process that you have to pay attention to it. Not that you have a mental class, from 3 to 4 once a week or whatever. That's one way to do it, but I believe that you get the best results when it's a part of daily workload, and it's a part of the process.
Yeah, thanks for that, Vesa. And I guess that kind of leads into what we talked about a little bit, on our pre-call before we started chatting on this podcast. You mentioned the holistic pathway of development. So I wonder if you could talk more about that and why that's so important for the success of your players.
No, that's my favorite topic at the moment. I know that holistic approach is kind of the in word at the moment, but I would like to give a little bit background. When we started it, and you know, I mean, we were all about high performance. We were all about winning, and we did a lot of winning, and we did well. But as a player, you know, you win a big tournament, and we all know how it feels the next day. It's kind of, it's behind you, it feels good, but there has to be something more than that. And I'm glad to say that, you know, I'm 57 years old now, and I'm starting to mature a little bit. So I'm starting to see the big picture that actually we are really lucky, because I fully believe that tennis is the best sport in the world to teach really important life lessons. I'm not saying it only because I'm a tennis player and it's my sport. I really think that the characteristics of this sport are absolutely fantastic to teach the life lessons to the kids, and that's what we try to do, in a sense that we are focusing on the whole kid, the whole player, not only as a tennis player but as a human being. Because again, you know, the younger players, younger kids, everybody has their own timetable. You know, you don't try to everybody to get to the next level at the same time. You know, they have their own timetable, and you have to respect that one. So, you know, it's really important that we look at it, that what is the best for the kid as a person and not only as a tennis player. And I'm totally convinced, and I'm lucky because I have data from the last 22 years here at JTCC, that when we can achieve to get a player a really healthy perspective, not only about the sports but about life, I'm convinced that those players actually handle the pressure much better. And as a result, they will do more winning. Their pressure tolerance is much better. Their pressure management skills are much better when they have a healthy perspective about the life. And they, you know, the hitting the tennis ball is not the only thing they do. They are normally very good academically. It goes hand in hand. So I feel that the more time we spend making them really well-rounded young student athletes is actually going to improve their tennis skills, and more importantly, that pressure tolerance will go through the roof, and as a result, they will win a lot. And it's a nice positive cycle that just keeps on going on. So you know, that's kind of what we are trying to do. It's a lot of work. But it's fun because you know that you are doing something really important other than just making them to hit some great forehands or backhands. So there's an old cliche, you know, when people ask coaches, you know, how the kids are doing, and you answer that, hey, ask me in 20 years. But it's really true. And I am really big on so-called teacher's mentality with our coaches. I do not want to hire anybody who doesn't have a teacher's mentality. That means that you think like a teacher, and you teach like a teacher, and it's a very unique mentality and mindset, which is difficult to live with on daily basis. But that is really important to us.
Brilliant stuff, Vesa. So yeah, a couple follow-ups on that. First off, I'm curious how or what signs are there for you to determine whether like a prospective coach actually has the the skills that you're looking for to be able to teach the students how you would like.
That's a really great question, and I hope that I'm getting better with that one. I think that we will never master it, but it's interesting, you can look at it in a way that when we are players, we are taught to be selfish, but as a teacher you have to be unselfish. When you are a player, you are taught to be kind of arrogant. When you are a teacher, you have to be humble. When you are an athlete or player, you are taught to be coached to be kind of, you are a taker, and when you are a teacher, you have to be a giver. And when you really start to think about that one, that is a 180-degree mental shift that has to happen. And that's why it's sometimes very difficult for great players to become really good teachers, because that shift is very difficult to do. Talking about, making it from being a taker, and then suddenly you have to be a giver. And it sounds simple, but it's difficult. So I always look at that, if the coach has potential to give back, and if they have a give back mentality, then are they thinking what is the best for the kid, and instead of best for the ego or for themselves or anything like that. So I don't have a scientific model. I trust my gut feeling a lot. I try to talk to the coach and the teacher a lot, and just get a feeling that if they have a ability to give back, and it's a process, it doesn't happen overnight, but I believe that ability to learn to give back and see the value on it, that's a must if and when you want to be a great teacher.
Yeah, very invaluable there. Thanks, Vesa. And then about the healthy perspectives, I'm wondering if you could give us insight as well on, how you go about, teaching this to your students, or maybe like what are the most important elements of having a healthy perspective.
No, that's we have done a lot of work on that one, and we do certain things, and I like to think that they are working great. And I it's my recommendation, and a lot of coaches and tennis centers would at least consider it. My point is that it's important for young tennis players to see different kind of tennis players, different kind of situations that players are facing. I give an example. We do a lot of work with the Special Olympic athletes. We do a lot of work with Paralympic athletes, wheelchair athletes, veterans, and the purpose of that one is that young tennis players learn to see that, hey, there are all kind of tennis players around. We all have different challenges, and when it's hopefully daily and weekly happening, that you can, it changes your perspective, it changes your way of thinking, and it hopefully becomes part of you. And that has been a really big part what we have done in us. And I believe that you create that give back mentality, but more importantly, you start to understand that, hey, there are all kind of players around, all kind of situations, and you really start to to understand that it's not the most important thing to smack the forehand as hard as you can. You need to learn how to behave, and you need to learn how to show respect not only to the game but your opponent. And it has so many positives involved when you get that perspective moving to the right direction. So just in practical terms, we try to make sure that our players are spending a lot of time with all kind of different tennis players. And I think that over the time, it's really going to show that we can actually have an impact on the perspective of the young student athletes.
Yeah, that's really brilliant, Vesa, because there's some times where maybe I'm having a tough day on the court, and then I remind myself to be grateful that I'm even able to play. Where a lot of people are not able to play, a lot of countries, there's no courts and things like that. So it seems like when your players are exposed to, Special Olympics players and Paralympics players and so forth, they have that gratitude that, they're maybe more capable of doing, certain things, or at least, athletically. So I think that's really a brilliant thing. And so then how does that contribute to the type of, as we talked about again before this podcast, like positive versus negative pressure? How does that all pan out there?
No, that's a great question. So, I'm a simple guy, and I look at things in a simple way. I feel there's internal pressure and there's external pressure. Unfortunately, we cannot do too much about external pressure, but we can do a lot of things about internal pressure. And that's when you learn to see that there are different situations, and that's when your perspective gets broader and better, and you start to understand life and different situations better. I strongly believe that this internal pressure decreases, or it becomes kind of the positive. It becomes that driving force or motivational pressure, which is always helpful. And unfortunately, if that perspective is not right, then our players are dealing with really negative internal pressure, and they are dealing with then additional negative external pressure, and that's it's very difficult to be successful in that kind of cycle, and unfortunately it's happening all the time. So if we can lessen the internal pressure and turn it into something positive, I strongly believe that the stress management skills and the pressure tolerance skills will just skyrocket, and not only results on the tennis courts will get better, but it's that life lessons that you can handle almost everything, and so how that's how I look at it, that there are things that you can control and then things that you cannot, and external pressure is tough. It's always going to be there, and but you have to have a strong perspective to be able to handle it, and that means that your internal pressure hopefully turns to be something positive.
Gotcha, Vesa. And can you just give us an example, just for clarity's sake, of like a positive internal pressure versus a negative internal pressure?
Sure. It's just like you actually mentioned it. It's an old cliche, but we always think as an athlete that we have the hardest and we are unlucky, and this is not fair, and it's just, that's very normal, and but if you have lived through the experiences and seen other people to struggle with different kind of challenges and overcoming it, it gives you that confidence and knowledge. You know what, my situation is fine, and it's not as bad as I think, and that gives you energy and confidence to move forward and tackle these external pressures. So that's what I mean, that there are always, as we all know, there's always better players than we are somewhere, but there's also always people who have it much harder than we do, and that can hopefully put things into the perspective.
Yeah, for sure, Vesa. And in addition to having your players, congregate with Special Olympics and Paralympics and so forth, players, are there any other techniques or things that you do to further, alleviate the internal pressures?
And you mentioned those groups, but we also, just a normal, we do a lot of outreach, community outreach. Our players, you cannot train here if you don't give back. So you have to go out to the community and you have to give back. And so we are kind of systematically working on that one. And so all these things combined, I feel like they can have an positive impact on the amount of internal pressure and then how you deal with that one. So we all know that this game is it's really rough. It's really tough mentality wise, because there's so much losing happening. There are so many disappointments that happens in every match, and you just have to hopefully have a perspective to deal with that stuff and keep on going forward.
Definitely, Vesa. And is there a case study you can mention for us, particular player that, maybe had a lot more negative internal pressure that you all worked on, and then, it helped their game a lot more as a result of that?
Yeah, I mean that in different degrees, it's funny thing. It's with every player. It's with every player, but the funny thing is that if we just want to use the names that we kind of all the people know, Francis's and Dennis's and Robins, they all have learned to see through the life experiences that, hey, it's a privilege to play this game, and by accident or by hopefully systematic efforts, they learn to put things into the perspective. We all see how Francis is, on the court. He simply loves the game, and he knows that it's a privilege to play the game, and I'm so happy for him now that it's really starting to show, and he's now connecting with the crowds and everything. But he has always been the kid who just simply love the game, and that put things into the perspective. Other one is that again, is we have a couple of guys like Mitchell Frank and Dennis Goodler. One went to the pro route and one went to the college route. They both became extremely successful, and when they were teenagers, they help each other in a sense to understand the perspective and understand that what you do on the court is important, but it is not the most important thing in the world. And I'm so proud of these guys because they are fantastic human beings at the moment. And I like to think that the tennis has a lot to do with that one. It really teaches you to be humble and understand that there's a much bigger picture out there. Then somebody like Robin Montgomery is a great example. She actually started with our outreach program when she was 5-6 years old. And then from there, she was identified to come and train. And I'm so proud of her in a sense that when she was 11 and 12, she was systematically giving back. She was on those sites back and teaching some other underprivileged kids and teaching and motivating, and she keeps on doing that one. So there's another example of somebody who just has a healthy perspective nowadays how to compete and knows that there are bigger pictures than just hitting the tennis ball. And like I said, these are just examples of names that everybody knows. I'm really proud of the fact that there are tons of players who are playing college now, but they have these skills now, and I know for the fact that they are going to be successful whatever they do in their lives. So I just highlighted those few because it just you can see it on every day or every week on Tennis Channel, but I can tell that these players, one of the reasons they are successful is because they really have a perspective what they are doing and how they are doing things, and it's really paying off at the moment.
Love that. Love hearing that, and big respect to your programs and requiring community outreach. I think that's it's amazing. Obviously, as you mentioned, a lot of people love to hear about the top players. So I am curious about Francis, of course. During his time at JTCC, and it's interesting that actually my former teammate had coached him for a while there. But what were some of the biggest things that you all worked on with Francis, like that you think really made a huge impact on his game moving forward?
I would love us to take all the credit in the world that we created Francis, this and that, but unfortunately, I cannot do that. It's one thing that we did do is we created an environment that he could really, develop and create this love of the game. I think that is one of the biggest things that, Francis is one of the players who loves the game more than anybody else. The tennis was his best friend, and he took a great care of his best friend. He spent so much time against the hitting the ball, and we try to encourage that one. It's not only, I always remember, and I have talked to, one coach who was really helping him a lot was Frank Salazar in a later part of Francis's junior career. And we always remember when Frank was working with Dennis and Mitchell, and, when those guys were like 14 years old, Francis was like 9 years old, and he was just sitting on the tennis court, his feet didn't even touch the ground, and he was just observing and learning and just, paying so much attention. And then after that, he would go and hit against the wall. And so that is kind of the environment that, I don't want to take a credit that we designed it that way. It happened to happen that way, and we kind of acknowledge that one. So now we try to create the environment that kids have a chance to learn from other good players, and they get that self-belief that it can be done. And then we encourage them to go and practice and train and hit against the wall and learn to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. So kind of that freedom of making mistakes. And that was Francis, he's a great big moment player at the moment, a big point player. When he was a junior, he was absolutely one of the best in the world to play the big points, because first he had a good perspective, but again, he just loved the game more than just winning or losing, and that kind of has helped him a lot.
All right. I really hope that you enjoyed this Mental Game Masterclass episode. And once again, to check out the full interviews with Nick Saviano, Peter Freeman, and Vesa Ponka, please check out the show notes page or go to tennisfiles.com/podcast. And you can find them or the links to them there, as well as each individual episode in the Big Gray podcast player on that page. And I would also really appreciate it if you enjoyed this episode and found value from it to improve your game, that you would leave a review for the podcast at tennisfiles.com/Apple Podcasts or in your favorite podcast app that you use to listen to the show. I just find that Apple Podcasts is the most helpful for the show in terms of more reviews and ratings translate to it being more visible for more people, which just helps all tennis players. So thanks a lot in advance for your help with that. Really appreciate that very much. Also want to leave you with a quote, as I do at the end of every show, and this one is by Winston Churchill. And he said, "To improve is to change. To be perfect is to change often." A really fantastic quote that changing and experimentation, as was discussed in this episode, is really a big key to improving yourself and getting the most out of yourself. And think of change as little experiments. I find that to be very helpful, and to kind of, in a way, reduce the pressure of it being a big change versus just trying something out. And you can always adjust later, just like scientists do, I believe. So with that, thanks so much for listening, and I will see you on the next episode of the Tennis Files podcast. This is your host, mehrban, signing out.